There will be no 5 straight losing seasons for the Giants, which would have been the first time in franchise history.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants Baseball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Download the app and join me on Sundays toward the end of the games to get in on the action. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about, like I said, the Giants avoiding their 5th straight losing season, which unbelievably would have been the first time in franchise history dating back to their days in New York, even in the 1800s. They have never had 5 consecutive losing seasons, and if they had had another losing season in 2021, that would have been 5, of course, starting with that 2017 team. So, the fact that they avoided it is a big deal because I think people were ready to be upset. We had some people saying before the season, they were talking about potentially needing a change in the front office if this group hadn't been able to show significant signs of progress 3 years into this transition. And, I always thought those conversations were a little bit silly, especially because 2020 was not a normal year by any stretch, and they didn't have those opportunities to make some changes and transitions that they otherwise would have had. Like, think about all the changes we've had this year, all the players who have had a chance to break through with this team. That was much more limited in 2020. The Lamont Wade Juniors of the world, etc. And, in 2019, the Mike Yastrzemskis of the world, there was much less opportunity for that last year. But anyway, that's all been avoided because the Giants won their 81st game of the season last night in a drubbing of the New York Mets. The Giants won 8-0. They hit 4 more home runs to add to their major league lead, and they also pitched their 14th shutout of the year. Brandon Belt, in honor of his grandmother, who he lost, passed away before the game. He hit 2 home runs and had just a fabulous game. And in an interview on the post-game show after the game, he was emotional and just dedicated that game and the rest of the season to his late grandmother. So very touching stuff. And Brandon Belt is going to be a big topic of conversation for us today because he is coming up against the final, month of his contract. Like Brandon Crawford, like Buster Posey, potentially, we all thought that these guys, we were just playing out the last years of their deals, and that once those finally came off the books, the team could move on. But the last couple of seasons, they have really turned things around, those players, and they are keystones now to this team, I would argue. So I've put out a lot of stuff on Twitter this morning. I keep referencing all the tweeting I do, but Brandon Belt has been among the most powerful players in the league this year and also the last 2 years combined, the short year in 2020 combined with almost a full season this year. So we'll talk about that in more detail next, but I do want to get into just the significance of the Giants avoiding their 5th straight losing season. Kerry Crowley pointed out on Twitter yesterday that since 2000, 16 out of the 30 teams have had 5 straight losing seasons at some point during that period. But the Giants, obviously not one of them. They have never had that. I think we're a little bit spoiled to, I'm not sure how many people were going to be furious about if the Giants had had their 5th straight losing season. But I know that it was it was out there that people were ready to be upset. And, I talked to a lot of the other Locked On hosts throughout the course of the year, and I remember when we talked to the host of Locked On Phillies, that Phillies team has not had a winning season since 2011, I believe, and they certainly haven't made the playoffs since 2011. So, it could be a lot worse. You've got teams like the Mariners who haven't made the postseason since I think 2001. So to sit here and cry about 5 straight losing seasons would have been a little bit childish in my opinion, and to blame the, Farhan Zaidi-led front office that took over a terrible roster situation. And I mean, part of that had to do with we thought the contracts for Posey, Belt, and Crawford were, those were players past their primes and the production wasn't matching up with what they were earning. But under this new front office and this new coaching staff, they have been able to, turn their careers around. And now those are potentially bargain deals at this point. So that's a whole different story. But just the fact that not only are they not going to have a losing season, but they are having one of the best seasons in franchise history. And we don't know where it's going to end up. Fangraphs projects them now to win 100 games even, which I don't actually know. I wanna say they've only done that once. I could be totally wrong about that. It certainly doesn't come up very often because this Giants team does not, at least in the recent history, they have not won 100 games. In 2010, 12, 14, they did not really come close to 100 wins in a season. Those, the 2010 team, I think, won 92. The 2014, or excuse me, 2012 team, I think, won 94. And then that 2014 team was in the 80s. I want to say 88 wins. So this Giants team has been better than those teams. And as I said, they added to their league lead with 4 more home runs. So coming up next, we will get into the specifics of the players who made this win last night possible. We'll talk about a bunch of roster moves that got made. We had players coming off the IL and then getting put right back on the IL. Kevin Gausman put on the IL, but it's nothing to worry about. Sammy Long, I don't think I've even mentioned his name yet. He was fabulous filling in for an injured Anthony DeSclafani last night, so we'll talk about him as well. So all of that is coming up next, but I want you to know that this episode is brought to you by Green Room. Green Room is the first social audio platform made for sports fans. The app is free to download, and once you're in, you can talk with me, other fans, athletes, and insiders in real time about your favorite team or sport. I host rooms for Locked On Giants once a week, usually on Sundays. And so, yes, you can finally join in on the conversation you listen to here every day. You'll have a chance, like I said, to chat with me and might even have a chance to be featured on the Locked On Giants podcast through our Green Room conversations. Be sure to join me this weekend. I do them every Sunday. It's a lot of fun. We usually have a kind of small group, but we hang out and chat. You can get invited up on stage and talk, and you can also type in a chat, and I can answer questions or comments that you have there. So it's a lot of fun. Go download the free Green Room app now, currently available on all iOS devices. Be sure to create a profile, link your Twitter, and join the MLB group for the latest league updates. Follow me at Ben Kaspick to be notified when my room goes live. I know you won't want to miss it. I host them Sundays toward the end of the games. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the Giants, so I'll see you there. Green Room, changing the way we talk sports. All right, as promised here in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about Brandon Belt a little bit and also some other key players who went into this 8-0 win for the Giants. Brandon Belt hit 2 home runs. Lamont Wade Jr. added a home run. Mike Yastrzemski also went deep with a 451-foot shot off the truck in deep right center field over the bullpens. But I do want to get into Brandon Belt, and I guess Sammy Long will save that conversation, which is an extremely relevant conversation because Sammy Long actually is going to have a big say in the rest of this season potentially, and he may even have a big say in the future of this team. But Brandon Belt, his contract is coming up, and so it becomes a pretty significant and large question about the future of the first base position and specifically the future of, whether or not Brandon Belt is going to be there at that first base position for years to come, or if this is his last year in San Francisco. So he's been one of the most polarizing Giants players in a long time. And if you know me, I have always been firmly on one clear side of the belt wars, and that is the pro belt side. I've always maintained that if you have a team full of Brandon Belts, that would be a very good team and a very good offense. Obviously, not, you can't have Brandon Belt on the mound, but other than that, if you're getting that type of offense, because, the criticism of Belt frequently has been some of the offensive stuff. And one of the big criticisms is that he didn't hit for a lot of power, which is not actually true. He hit for a lot of power relative to anyone else on the Giants. And a lot of his power came in the form of doubles and just extra base hits in general, not necessarily judging him by home runs. But this year, I mean, last night he hit number 18 and 19 in terms of home runs. So he's finally going to reach that 20 home run mark unless something terrible happens and he basically can't play the rest of the year because he's got about 6 weeks left and needs just one more home run. Mike Yastrzemski hit his 20th, the second time he's hit 20, and he also hasn't played nearly a full season. So we're talking about 30 home run power from multiple Giants players this season. But the isolated power number is where I kind of want to focus. And then I'm going to make the case that Brandon Belt is someone the Giants absolutely should keep, whether it's through an extension or offering him the qualifying offer, which he may accept, or, I guess those would be the two means. But in 2021, the isolated power leaders in MLB with a minimum of 250 plate appearances. That was kind of a lot to say out loud, but isolated power is slugging minus batting average, and it communicates extra bases per at bat. The league average is 169, and Brandon Belt this season is at 309, which is fifth best in baseball with a minimum of 250 plate appearances. The list of the top five goes Shohei Ohtani, Fernando Tatis Jr., Mike Zunino, Ronald Acuna Jr., and then Brandon Belt. So, he hits for power. I don't really want to talk about that he doesn't. People often say, well, the home runs, but this year, I mean, he's got 19 home runs in 71 games. He just set a career high in homers in 71 games. So he's kind of peaking offensively, but actually he's done this before in terms of, looking at park adjusted overall offensive numbers. He's had several extremely good seasons. And in fact, only one below average season in his entire career, and he was just 2 points below average. So he's been a well above average offensive player. A lot of that comes from getting on base via the walk, and he's also a good defensive first baseman. So I don't know what more you could really want. So since 2020, just to give a bit of a larger sample, among all players, not just first basemen, but all players with at least 400 plate appearances, Belt is once again fifth. The list goes Tatis Jr., Ronald Acuna Jr., Shohei Ohtani, George Springer, and then Brandon Belt. So, Triples Alley on Twitter made a great point that if we adjust this to talk about first baseman, that means Brandon Belt is first because none of these other players play first base. And what's ironic is that the argument people have made throughout the years is that Brandon Belt doesn't hit for enough power for a first baseman, but isolated power is probably the best number we can look at really to discern power. And he's number one this year among first basemen and number one among first basemen since 2020 as well. And I'm assuming, without looking, that Freddie Freeman meets the criteria that he has the plate appearances necessary to crack that list. This guy won the MVP award, Freddie Freeman, in 2020, and Brandon Belt is leading him in that power department, isolated power. So the Giants don't really have an heir apparent at first base. There's nobody they have primed to take over that position. I know a lot of talk has been made about Lamont Wade Jr. and potentially Darren Ruff in a platoon or Wade Jr. and Flores in a platoon, but I just think that thins them out way too much. Like Wade Jr. and Flores and Ruff play a lot as it is, even with Brandon Belt on at first base every day. And so if you take away Belt and put those guys at first, you're introducing lesser depth at the first base position. And they're just a better team with Brandon Belt on the field. And they can offer him the qualifying offer. It's a 1 year deal that'll be for around $20 million. It's based on the average salaries of the, top X amount of paid, top salaries in the league, like 20%. I forget exactly what the number is, but it goes up a little bit every year typically, and it's around 20 million, but a little less. And the Giants can offer this to him, and he may accept it, but he's also a candidate for an extension. I'm saying it would probably be 2 years like Brandon Crawford, but maybe a little bit less money because he plays, a less premium position, and he also has more of an injury history. But all of that said, I mean, my heart goes out to Brandon Belt with, dealing with the loss of his grandmother. He said the number one thing he can do is just play great down the stretch here in her honor. So that would be fantastic. And obviously, best wishes to Brandon Belt and his family during this difficult time. And I want to see this guy back. He's one of the best first basemen in franchise history. And he provides a lot of value to the Giants. It's no surprise that they've had a lot of winning with this guy in the lineup at first base. So that's all for Brandon Belt. And coming up next, we'll kind of wrap up the loose ends. We'll talk about Sammy Long and talk about other roster moves that got made with all the injured list stuff that we saw last night. It's that time of year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, Bet Online is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest, open now at Bet Online. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champ Buccaneers and Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up using the promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. You can also use the promo code LOCKEDON. All right, as promised here in the final segment of this show today, we're going to wrap up all the other loose ends. I actually can't believe I didn't even mention at this point. Both Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford exited last night's game against the Mets with injuries. The reason I haven't mentioned them is because Gabe Kapler said after the game that they were mild injuries. He expects Brandon Crawford to play tonight, but he didn't say he expected Buster Posey to play tonight. Posey exited with right knee discomfort. Posey appeared to be saying he was fine and good to go, but they've been so conservative with these injury concerns that I'm not at all surprised they took him out of the game. Crawford came out with lower back tightness. So the fact is, they're just going to be really careful with their veteran players down the stretch, and it really is how they've kept these guys fresh all season long. So it's not surprising they took them out. It is obviously a little bit of a concern, but I would imagine that they are fine. Like Posey looked like he could stay in the game. Crawford, Kapler said that he was going to probably play tonight. So we'll continue to monitor this, but I don't think it's anything to get too freaked out about yet. So prior to the game, some injury updates. Anthony DeSclafani played catch and could return to start this weekend in Atlanta. That's huge. They really need this guy down the stretch and potentially in a postseason rotation. I think losing DeSclafani would be a really significant blow considering the struggles recently of Kevin Gausman. And yeah, I mean, if you lose if Gosman is inconsistent and you don't know what you're going to get, and DeSclafani is out, that just really thins them out. And their only really reliable starter is Logan Webb, who's, as great as he's been, he's still unproven. So Kevin Gosman was placed on the injured list, and we didn't get an explanation at first. And it was like, I mean, the assumption was that it was vaccine related because normally they're going to give you an explanation, but they didn't in that case. And we later heard that it was vaccine related for Gosman. which is the same thing that just happened with Longoria. So the assumption from me is that they are getting booster shots after receiving Johnson and Johnson. I don't know exactly because, third doses are not approved yet if they got the mRNA ones to start. And technically, I don't know. We don't need to get into that, but it's vaccine related for Gosman, so he shouldn't have to miss any time because he wasn't scheduled to start in this series anyway. So he should be able to be good to go in Atlanta. Evan Longoria was reinstated from the COVID injured list, which was also vaccine related, but then he was placed on the 10-day IL with a right hand contusion, which he sustained in the last game of that series against the Mets in San Francisco. So Longoria, I'm not exactly sure when that retroactive date was, but about a week ago. So he probably can't return for a few more days. I could look it up, but I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but probably a few more days. So that's okay. They've been able to deal with it so far. Chris Bryant did not start yesterday's game. I was a little bit concerned at first. I thought maybe the hamstring, but they were just giving him a day off. It's a little bit unusual for players to have a day off, just standard rest following an off day. I know some people have been saying, a travel day is not an off day. Actually, though, they didn't travel yesterday. They traveled 2 days ago. Or excuse me, they didn't travel on the off day. They traveled after the game on the day prior. So that doesn't even make sense. But the Giants are a little bit unconventional. So they wanted to give Chris Bryant 2 days in a row off. And the anticipation is that he's going to play the rest of this road trip every day. So that's great. Can't wait to see him back out there tonight. So moving on to Sammy Long, saving kind of the best for last. Sammy Long just went out there and shoved for 5 1/3 innings. He held the Mets obviously scoreless as the Giants pitched a shutout. Only one walk. I thought that his command was some of the best I've seen him have all season long with the Giants. Scattered only 3 hits, struck out 4. So the peripherals for Long continue to look pretty solid. I mean, when I look at the numbers across the board, there's not really anything that jumps out as bad. The left on base percentage is unsustainably low, so I would expect him to strand more of his own base runners. We've talked a lot about the magical 72% number for stranding your own base runners. It's really nobody does significantly worse or better, generally speaking. So when I see Long at just 61%, I expect that to go up by about 10 points. And that explains why he has a 3.41 fielding independent pitching, 3.49 expected ERA, and yet the ERA itself is 4.81. So we can just see it with our own eyes. There's promise beyond a 4.81 ERA. And he showed that to us last night as he dominated the Mets for the most part. And they really needed him to. He stepped up in a huge spot because he was filling in for Anthony DeSclafani. The rotation is a little bit in shambles right now. You've got Johnny Cueto, who's been, hit or miss going tonight. And so Sammy Long covering some innings because you don't know what you're going to get out of Alex Wood and Johnny Cueto coming up. So for Long to go 5 1/3, and they only have to go Jackson, Alvarez, Chatwood to finish out this game, that was a big deal. So Sammy Long has very much earned another opportunity, and he could be a big part of this team's future. He's under club control forever. He's got the 3 minor league options, although one of those option years are being used this year. But if he proves he can stick, he can be a guy who could stick in this Giants rotation or in the pitching staff and the pitching mix to some degree for years and years to come. So that is all the time we have for today. I hope I was able to cover everything. It was just a great night for the Giants. They're on pace for 247 home runs, which would shatter their franchise record. Really hope that happens. What a story that would be. And then, courtesy of Alex Pavlovich, the Giants have had the National League's best record for 101 straight days, and they're 81-44. Just a remarkable season, and it continued last night, just taking care of the New York Mets. Fangraphs listing the Giants' playoff odds at 100%. Of course, that is rounded. It is not; they have not actually clinched yet, but they are in a very good position at this point in time. So coming up tomorrow, we will be talking about tonight's game. It is Johnny Cueto on the mound for the Giants. I'm pulling up Taijuan Walker on the mound for the Mets. I don't think we saw him the last time the Mets were in San Francisco. He's had a pretty good year, but I think he's had some struggles recently. So that'll be the Giants' opponent tonight. So we'll talk all about that on tomorrow's show. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Kaspick. That's Kaspick. Anyway, thanks again for listening. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. You are now Locked On Giants.